humus in the woods. Yeah, I mean, because there is.
A successful spiritual institution will go bankrupt. The sign that you're successful is you spent all your money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at odds with the idea that you're trying to conserve it all the time. That a really vital one is always on the edge.
Right.
This new faith community that I'm working on, first couple weeks, I assured everyone, one, there would be no membership requirement. There would be no committees and no board. That we will meet as a community, and each week we'll ask how we're doing. And if things need to be done, someone will offer to do it. If we don't need to have meetings to talk about it. And my role as a facilitator, and along with a couple other people, ministers and other traditions, we'll just do our thing. We don't have to have approval, nor do we. And the group will, by its vitality or lack of vitality, would decide how it's doing. It's also not relying on money too.
I mean, doesn't that isn't that the dynamic and the ingredient that keeps everybody awake? That they know the success and failure is incumbent upon that.
Yeah.
The lifeblood, like that weekly.
Right.
You can't say, oh, that'll never happen. That'll never, because it's now.
It's now.
It's now.
You're right here, and we do it symbolically. And one, we have the celebration time at 5 on Sunday evenings, and I do most of the crafting of those. But I don't do the readings. They're out on the table. When it's time for them, somebody has to pick them up and read them. Or sometimes they're projected on the screen. There's sharing through the whole service. There's not a, we'll have a talk back later. It's all participatory. And then after it, we have a potluck community supper. And everyone knows, and that's the symbolic part, there will be no supper unless you bring something to share. And once in a while, we'll have someone who comes in who's homeless or otherwise. And it's okay, we always have enough food.
Yeah.
But then by the next week, they come back and they bring something. Now, it may be only a small can of something or whatever. But that idea that whatever we're serving, whether it's spiritual or whether it's meal, we have to provide it.
Yeah.
And people are having a good time with it. And I'm having a good time with it because I don't have to be set in liturgy. If it has a vitality, it will have its own longevity. The fact that even the celebration time looks different week by week, it's totally thematic worship, means you can't say, oh, well, we got to have this every week because this was so good this week.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't go that way. So
Yeah.
we were originally housed in an AME congregation building. But we're in an area where people can walk to us, bike to us. We're hoping it would be, racially, class, theology diverse, and it has been so far.
What is the human sustainability of institutions with faith? That the bigger the institution, the harder the fall, and the more fight to the end to maintain that.
Right. And nostalgic fight, where it's often embedded in, remember when we used to be.
Yeah.
And, in some ways, I think a lot of our congregations would do well to suddenly abandon the facilities they're in and spend a year to ask what it is they'd really like to keep and then move on.
Yeah.
The congregation here in Utica did that back in the 70s, where they got rid of their somewhat beautiful but also albatross of a building and said, what does the future look like? It looks like an energy efficient, smaller facility that can be hospitable. So
it's right-sized.
Yeah, right-sized and right intention. Is it about worshiping a rose window?
Right.
Or is it about a place in which conversation can take place? It seems to me that after the consolidation, if religious education had had more of a role in shaping the association, we would be a very different organization today.
Yeah.
But instead it was relegated to basements and Sunday school superintendents and stuff like that, and the ministers took over as the predominating mode of interpretation, and that sets up very different dynamics.
It has. So what's the name of your community?
Spiritual Seekers of Key West.
Nice.
And there's a Facebook page to it and a website too and all that sort of stuff.
That's awesome.
And we just sort of try to get the information out, and Yeah, right now we're gathering 8 to 12 people. But the thing that struck many of the people who are Christian in the context is that we are functioning very much like first century Christians did. That we didn't have churches, we didn't have bishops, we didn't have any institutionals that way. Communities met, generally over food, and talked about this wonderful new message. So it doesn't have to be Christian necessarily, but just that's what we're doing. We're talking in spiritual language, that it's okay to talk about communications with the dead. It's okay to talk about channeled messages. It's not, many of the things that are taboo in most liberal religion are welcome. Because the question is not who said it, it's does it strike a tone in you that you need to hear. And that's a change. And that's a lot of fun. So you have Emerson coming in along with, Seth or Ricky or a bunch of other spirits, and they're all on the same page. Then maybe there's something there going on. And in the celebration time, we don't do joys and sorrows. That's over dinner. In the celebration time, we're focusing on something bigger, wider, more inviting. And then if there are things that we need to process as community among ourselves, that's over the mealtime. I think we're on the cusp of something. Total digression.
Welcome.
That religious education has a different foundation than ministry does. And that education grows out of the social sciences and ministry grows out of theology. And to put those two together as Ministry of Religious Education was asking religious educators to fit themselves for a robe of something that was not their actual being. And that we needed to figure out ways, which we're now doing with the religious education credentialing program, that says religious education is its own entity. But of course the power dynamics was saying one is real and one's not real. It's possible there will be a strong institution that becomes increasingly irrelevant to what's actually happening. I think we were there from about 1968, 69. It was how we chose not to really engage the black empowerment issue. And I can argue either side as being right in this view, but when you stop talking together, then we each decided, well, there's going to be a right way and a wrong way.